All right, welcome to the Equine Business Workshop. We are so glad everyone's here, and this is our second year. You know, the Pro Horseman Council has done a great job, and they're going to continue to do an even better job and take it to the next level of educating our professionals and, you know, making sure that we have all the information out there for our professionals in the equine industry to be as successful as they can be. So we really appreciate you being here, participating. Before I go even start, I want to thank Marielle. Becky Peskin, will you stand up for us? Yeah, I know. Yeah. You know that we cannot be as successful as we are with Pro Horseman without the continuous support of Marielle in the American Quarter Horse Association and with the professional horsemen. So they sponsored our reception last night. This today is sponsored by them. And your free room, Marielle offers 50 free rooms to professional horsemen. And we just really appreciate it. It's expensive to come to the convention, and we appreciate everybody's time and dedication. And thank you for helping get the professionals here. And they're so important to our industry and great support. So thank you again. That being said, Melinda is, if you did get on the list for a free night, Melinda needs to make sure that she has a W-9 for you and checks you off the list. And then what happens is we take that back to the office and we'll send you all checks for one free night. So get with Melinda before you leave today. I want to thank everybody in the room, the professional horsemen, and everybody in our industry. The topics, so last year was our first year. The topics this year were driven by you. So we did a survey. We're going to do that again to set up our topics for next year. And we really appreciate the input. We appreciate the passion that you have. And so all of our topics this year were driven by you, and we appreciate that. I want to thank Dr. Schumacher, Lynn Leonard, Dr. Heird, and Al Dunning for presenting for us today. They're truly dedicated to our industry, and we just really appreciate them. I want to give a shout out to my teammates from the office that are here. Partner in crime, Pete Kyle, our Chief Operating Officer, Tim Callahan. Thanks, Tim. Tim does all of our IT work and they're just awesome. We've got Tanner Willis at the back. He's going to video. All of these presentations will be available for our members online on our Pro Horseman page. Is Doug back there? Okay. We've got Melinda. And how about Ward? Is Ward still here? Good. Thank you, Ward. We're all great teammates, and we're all together driving the ship forward. So we appreciate that. And our EC members are here. I don't know, did Sandy make it yet? We have 3 professional horsemen on the executive committee. We have Sandy Arledge, who's our president. Ralph, will you stand up for us? He's also Pro Horseman. He's our incoming president, okay? We have Dr. Heird. Is he? Yep, good, thank you. He's also Pro Horseman. I don't know if Stan made it this morning, but we've got Butch Weiss. Thank you, Butch, for being here and joining us. I appreciate that. It's great. So I need to make another introduction. I want to introduce our 2016 Professional Horseman Council members. So Steve, will you stand up? Steve's been our chair. He goes off this year because he's been leading the ship for the last 3 years. We appreciate you, Steve. Jim Searles. There he is, back there. Thank you, Jim. Robin Fred. Okay, so Robin is our new incoming chair, and we're glad to have you. That's great. Good, thank you for taking that on. Steven Stevens. And Jerry couldn't make it. Sue Solsey. Are you here, Sue? Awesome. There's Sue. Thanks. Tom Macbeth. Thank you, Tom. He's at the back. You have to get here early to get a seat at the back. Tom Crawley. Tom, thank you. Dan Trine. Thank you, Dan. Gary Roberts. Awesome. Thanks, Gary. Beth Austin. All right. Thanks, Beth. Okay. And new this past year is we've been allowed to have an EC member as a liaison to bridge the gap from Pro Horseman to the executive committee. And Dr. Heird has served in that capacity this past year, and we really appreciate your leadership. You've been awesome. Thank you for taking the time to be on our meetings, and we're honored and blessed to have you there. Okay, so Craig is going to introduce. We have a couple surprises, and that Craig is going to announce. Some of you might know that we have 2 new team members on our show, in our show department, that we're really excited about. But at this time, I'd like to introduce Executive Vice President Craig Huffines. He's going to say a few words. And Craig, I wanted to say that we appreciate you guiding our ship in the right direction and your vision. You're a true visionary, and we appreciate that.
Thank you.
So he's going to give us a few words, and then Steve's going to take the podium, and we're going to get rocking and rolling.
Okay.
So we appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you, Patty. Well, welcome, everybody. Appreciate that. You know, it's right at 2 years that I came on board with AQHA, and one of the things that I've learned in 2 years is there's a lot to learn as it relates to our quarter horse industry. And certainly when the professional horsemen got together, Steve, and decided to put together this forum, this business educational forum, that is a major deal as it relates to our industry and the way in which we go about our business. And education's number one. Y'all are the trainers. Y'all are the leaders. And so the fact that we're gathering here this morning to teach the teachers, to train the trainers, to share ideas, to move our industry along is a big deal. And so thank you, Steve and the team, for initiating this, because this now needs to extend to the rest of our membership, because we're information hungry. And so as we progress this industry, this is a big part of that educational component. So thank you. And as far as Becky's Peskin's concerned, I had a great visit with her about a month ago down in Atlanta at Mariel's headquarters. And of course, in the midst of the bluster of a merger between 2 mega companies, she had us on the phone with representatives of BI and Mariel talking about this industry and talking about how we can make it a better industry and how we can protect the health of our horse. And so thank you, Becky, and thank you for being so supportive of this educational forum and of this body of people that we call our leaders. So that's wonderful. We have a couple of announcements because we've done some shifting around in our show department. Of course, the first thing I'd like to do is congratulate Patty Carter for now being the new director of the judging program. So how about that? You bet. We're very proud of Patty. We're very confident in her abilities, and she's going to take over where we left off, and I know she's going to go great guns. As we moved her around, we had some openings. Of course, you know, she didn't admit it, but she was doing about 2.5 jobs before. So we've hired 2 new people. Justin Billings will be joining us, coming in from Ohio to Amarillo. Justin, anchor that hat down. Justin's going to be one of our directors of shows, working directly under Pete Kyle. And Karen McQuistion's going to be joining us and working with the professional horsemen. Karen? So congratulations to both of them. It's a great team. We've assembled a great team, and of course, those of you, Diane and Stephanie, I see those of you who are involved in organizing show activities realize the intensity of that and the detail of that. And I'm very proud of this group of folks and what they mean to our business and putting on a professional event for you and tracking the points and the like of that. So we're here. It's going to be a big week. This is morning one, and want to wish y'all all a great meeting, and I look forward to visiting with you throughout the weekend. Have a great one.
Thank you, Craig. Good morning. I have to follow them two speaking. It's not the easiest thing for me. I've been doing this for 3 years now, and this is finally the last time you have to hear my hillbilly accent and me stumble through these notes that Patty's made for me. So, thanks everybody for coming in early and coming to the small business, the Equine Industry Business Workshop. I got to get the terms right. We changed it a little bit this year. Over the last 3 years, I have been involved with probably the greatest group of horsemen and women in our industry, and I've learned so much. And I'm not going to name all of you because I'll forget somebody, but I really appreciate the opportunity to be a part of this. I've always dreamed of just being a part of AQHA, and this has been truly rewarding for me and for Becky and our family as we hold this association very, very close to us. It's the hand that feeds us. So we really appreciate being given the opportunity. Patty Carter, I can't say enough about this lady. There is no one more inspiring, encouraging, willing to help anyone, anytime than Patty Carter. And if AQHA ever had a superhero, I know she's got a golden lasso somewhere on her, because that is Wonder Woman right there. Also, I will admit I've seen her mad, and guys, we don't want to flip that switch. So, but no, she really is. She really is the person who she has so much passion for this whole industry. It's been inspiring for me to work with her, and I'm glad Papa Joe's here this morning too. All we had to say was free food, and we knew he'd be here. So.
She learned it all.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He's taking all the credit. So, anyway, we're going to get started here. We've got a great group of speakers today, and I'm excited to hear from each and every one of them. We don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to keep it brief. Our first speaker is Dr. Stephen Schumacher. Dr. Schumacher has been involved with the United States Equestrian Federation Equine Drugs and Medications Program for the last 20 years, serving as a testing technician and testing veterinarian. In addition, he has been the chief administrator of the Equine Drugs and Medication Program since December of 2006. He is also a member of the FEI Veterinary Committee, currently serves as a member of the FEI List Group, and was responsible for the equine drug testing at the 2010 World Equestrian Games. Dr. Schumacher received his Bachelor of Science degree from the Citadel, the military college in South Carolina, and is a graduate of the Ohio State University College of Veterinary Medicine. Please welcome Dr. Stephen Schumacher.
Well, thank you very much, Steve. Thank you, everyone, for having me here this morning. I have to tell you, I'm usually a mover when I talk, so I guess they're videoing this, so I have to stand in one place, so bear with me. I usually like to move around if I don't have Kevlar on. I'm less of a target that way and harder to hit, but this is actually a topic I really like to talk about. And the reason being is any organization would rather educate than adjudicate. It's not, no organization takes any sort of pleasure in calling a positive finding for a competitor. They really don't. I'm glad I'm not on the hearing committee for USEF. I'm glad I don't have to make a lot of those decisions. And it can be difficult sometimes. As mentioned, I've been with the Federation for a little more than 10 years, but I've been in the program from a pea catcher all the way up to testing veterinarian where I am now. You can say I worked from the ground up, catching that liquid gold. It's quite an experience. And catching urine is really a science. So, all right, so I'm going to give you a little bit of background about USEF, US Equestrian, and what we do as far as the drug testing program. And then I'm going to move into really the AQHA drug rule and try and give some insight to that. So this is our 48th year in existence, 1969. It started off as a spot test program at the Devon Horse Show in Pennsylvania. There they were actually taking saliva and urine samples. So if you ever heard the term spit box in the racing environment, that's why it was called the spit box, because they used to collect saliva samples. We have medication rules for 29 different breeds and disciplines. We also own our own laboratory. It's been in operation since 1995. The reason we developed it was due to the fact that we were looking for, it was in anticipation of the 1996 Olympic Games held in Atlanta. And then there are only 5 FEI laboratories in the world. And we're the only one. I'm getting a little feedback here, sorry. I can walk around if that works better. So we're only one of 5 FEI laboratories. FEI is the International Governing Body for Equestrian Sports. They're the International Olympic Committee member. There are laboratories in Hong Kong, Australia, France, the UK, and Lexington, Kentucky. We're the only one in the Western Hemisphere. And we operate the complete program. We do the testing, the analysis, the collection of samples, administrative work. We've got a lot of people who have been involved with the program for quite some time. Now, real quick, we had one that retired, I want to say 3 years ago now, who had finished up 34 years in the drugs and medications program. So we have the highest probably retention rate of any department at USEF. And we've got Diana, who's still there. She's, I think, approaching her 27th, 28th year. Of course, for United States Equestrian, that's very impressive. But I know at AQHA, I'm always looking and seeing like people have been there 30 years, 25, it's routine. So you're all to be congratulated for that, because I think it's difficult to keep people around like that. So the program, we utilize 150 veterinarians across the country, and these veterinarians are not employees of the Federation. They go out and they collect samples. 500 plus technicians. You're an acquisition specialist. We call them that so we don't have to pay more. Give them a title. But truly, if you've never, has anyone ever had to catch pee here? Usually the vets all raise their hand, because a number of the vets, I don't know if you remember from Barbaro a number of years ago, the catastrophic injury at the Kentucky Derby. The surgeon for that, Dean Richardson, there's a big surgeon at UPenn that took care of that horse. He was a pea catcher going through Ohio State University for this program. A number of large name veterinarians have done that as well. He worked actually for my predecessor. So we'll test between 900 and 1,000 days a year. You can see the number of samples, horses, the budget. Currently, we're funded by an $8 per horse per competition fee. I believe for AQHA it's $5. It's worked well for us. That started out in 1970. We started out at $1 and we're up to $8 now. So who do we test for? We test for, obviously, United States Equestrian Federation, American Quarter Horse. You all are probably, you are our largest outside association that we test for. Then we also test for international, the FEI I mentioned, endurance, polo, snaffle bit, the WPRA, and then also the USDA and the enforcement of their Horse Protection Act and with Tennessee walking horses. And we do others. So I would say that the basis for most of the drug rules up here, excluding the FEI and endurance, are USEF and AQHA. AQHA, I think we bounce ideas off of each other, and the AQHA has been actually very, very progressive in some areas that we've actually looked forward and tried to model after, one of those being the single non-steroidal rule. You all had it in place. It took us 10 years to get there, and now we don't hear a peep out of the industry. People realize they didn't need it. So these are our testing teams. If you don't know if you guys know that guy, Dr. Mike Martin. He's our longest running testing veterinarian. He doesn't like me to say he's our oldest testing veterinarian. But what's scary is that when Janice retired, excuse me, and had 34 years experience, he started testing right after she started. So he's been testing veterinarian for the program for over about 37 years. And these are all vet students. We consider the vet students at veterinary colleges to be kind of like the minor leagues. Kind of pull them up, they catch pee, they get used to it, and then they get up to the big leagues and they become a testing veterinarian when they go out. So this is the way they feel a lot of times. It's kind of, and this is actually a drug testing team that had way too much time on their hand. So, and then this is another team, and then this is our pony and miniature horse testing team. So if you see them sometimes, just steer clear of them. So drug testing, I'm going to go over some core philosophy, the understanding. Obviously, we're trying to provide safety and well-being for the horses in a level playing field. We want to minimize risk of long-term health implications. We want to discourage attempts to mask performance-limiting conditions using drugs. In other words, if a horse is not fit to compete, we don't want to prop them up unfairly with a medication that could subject them to a long-term issue. And then also, as we'll discuss here in a few minutes, we also allow for appropriate medication and therapy in the course of competition for legitimate therapeutic purposes. So how do we do it? We collect random samples at competitions. We educate members. We have a 24-hour, the ladies don't like to be called a hotline, but it is available 24 hours. And we distribute literature, there are resources online, but also we provide a deterrence. Just the fact that we go to competitions and show up, I think the potential for testing for everyone in the country, it does deter some of that behavior. And then also public relations. The way we look at it is our testing teams sometimes are only the only touch or only interaction they may have with AQHA. And so we try to make sure we put best foot forward. So this is obviously a simple principle. In true athletic competition, drugs should never be a substitute for training for humans or for horses. Sometimes I think we rationalize too much of it. And so why are they necessary? Obviously welfare, balance as I mentioned, public perception. In 2008, you had 8 bells who broke down following the completion of the Kentucky Derby. And they did a study in racing after that. And it was such an eye-opening study, and so frankly, it was kind of negative. It really never saw the light of day. It was a survey. And what they did is they went back and they surveyed people who were not inside the industry and got their take on their perception from outside. And these individuals couldn't discriminate phenylbutazone from an anabolic steroid. They thought it was all doping. In this day and age, we're getting more and more scrutiny of our industry, and so we have to obviously police our own. And obviously, I don't think has anyone heard of Lance Armstrong? None of you. I mean, there you have really such an elaborate, detailed, just over-the-top program to cheat. And it really erodes it for everyone else. For every other sport. It's not just human sports, but and what he did to people afterwards was incredible. So the needs and challenges for regulation. Obviously, we mentioned welfare, the risk to athlete, in this case the horse, potential for abuse. But we also have to balance it. We can't just go out and everyone say, well, why don't you go test every horse at every competition or the first 3 horses in every class? And that would be great. Financially, it would be absolutely impossible. The laboratory would be incapable of keeping up with that. So we have to have efficient use of resources, make sure that we distribute them appropriately. I think the AQHA does a great job of that. They do focus on some areas that need it. And then recognition of different athletes, show and performance horses. Obviously, race horses are, in my opinion, different. They're very, very similar. They're all horses. But there are some differences between show and race horses. One is the age that they compete. A lot of these horses, besides the young horse futurities, what we see in our area, older and older horses competing longer and longer and more frequently and doing it relatively safely. And so our rules may be, and when I say our rules, AQHA and USA, US Equestrian are more liberal than racing. But we do take into account that we're not competing at speed. And then also there's this concept between performance altering versus enhancing. You always hear the talk PEDs, performance enhancing drugs, in the human world, where a lot of what we do are performance altering. What we're trying to do is actually, or what's being attempted to be done through training, is to get the horse to do what we want it to do in a very quiet, collected manner, and behaviorally speaking, to be appealing to the judge. Sometimes people try and do that with medications, and that may not, it's not going to make the horse jump higher, run faster, or longer, but it may alter the behavior, and so we call it kind of PADs instead of PEDs. So the fundamental difference, going faster or further is not typically the goal of show horses. I think I covered that. Classification drugs. So getting into AQHA drug rule, what I'm going to try and do is make it simpler for people to understand on a broad level or broad landscape. There's no way in an hour I could teach anyone the very specifics of every drug under AQHA drug rule. I think that'd be impossible. I would be doing it a disservice. So what I'm going to do is talk about broad categories, broad sweeps of the program, and then also point you in the right direction for resources. It's out there. You have it. And I'll talk about our hotline in a second. So there are 3 broad classifications of drugs. This is the easiest way to remember. You have permitted substances, not regulated. You've got restricted substances, conditionally permitted therapeutics. And what these are amount of drug allowed in the body, or in the body at the time of competition is going to be quantitatively restricted. So it's how much of the drug is there. And then you have forbidden substances. These either have a potential to affect performance, they may have a welfare consideration for the individual, or they may actually upset the balance of competition as well. So some examples of permitted substances: antibiotics. With the exception of procaine, penicillin, antibiotics are permitted under AQHA rules. They do not need to be declared. They can be administered intravenously, intramuscularly, oral. Also antifungal agents, antiprotozoals, anti-ulcer medications, Tagamet, ranitidine, Gastrogard, UlcerGard, all that good stuff, and then antiparasitic agents. Those are all permitted without restriction in the horse and under AQHA rules. And that's, in my opinion, that's very appropriate. We also allow nutrients, vitamins, minerals, electrolytes and fluids, and then also some of the joint therapies, such as AQHA and Legend, and some of the other regenerative therapeutics out there. One drug, which is called Altrenagest, is permitted in the horse under AQHA rules, and that's something that it brings up another class of medications that we're looking at currently under U.S. equestrian rules. And I won't bore you with the details, but I'm sure you'll hear about it. And that's a drug called medroxyprogesterone acetate, or most horsemen recognize it as Depo-Provera. And it's a hormonal, it's a synthetic progesterone that's administered to women every 90 days to prevent ovulation, prevent conception. And when giving to a horse, it does not do what Regimate does. It does something completely different. So I'll leave you with that. I'm sure you'll be hearing more about it in the future here. And it's important to point out that all these things are permitted, but at a certain time, you may also be able to detect an abuse of one or the other. So these all must be for therapeutic reasons. So we had permitted. Now we're going to have the conditionally permitted, quantitatively restricted therapeutic medications. There are a number of these. And first of all, there are 7 non-steroidal drugs that you're permitted to use under AQHA rules within a quantifiable level in the horse. So Bute, Banamine, Ketaphen, Narquel, Naproxen, Surpass, and Equiox. This being the most recent entry to the scene after nothing else coming out for 30-some years. This one came on the market, and it's actually been a good product. It has had some confusion associated with, because there's also a dog product. We may talk about that at the end. One point I want to point out also is any compounded drug, you'll hear me say this a number of times, when we talk about compounded medications, sometimes trainers, veterinarians are taking a risk in using compounded medication. Sometimes that may be the only way you can get a medication or have an available medication to use in your horse, but they take a risk because a lot of times compounding can be a source of errors. You know, back in the polo incident in Florida, we had 21 polo ponies die. That was a compounding issue. They exceeded the amount of selenium, I can't remember how many times, and obviously had some dire consequences. What we also find with compounding sometimes is you'll see that the drug actually is lower or less than its labeled content. Or in some cases, we found with equine drug medication positives, the amount that is claimed to be in the tube, the sample, the bottle, it's actually higher than what's labeled. And that can also be a source of a drug positive. So some other quantitatively restricted medications, dexamethasone. I want to point out that dexamethasone has some specific dose and time recommendations, and actually all of these do as well. So the rule is you can't have X amount of drug in the horse, exceeding X at the time of competition. And for each one of these drugs, that level is different, and that level is published in your rule. It's in there. It says for bute, you're allowed 15 micrograms per ml in plasma of phenylbutazone. For flunixin, it's 1 microgram. What does that mean? The veterinarians in the room, you know, I don't know what that means, frankly. It's an analytical chemistry derived level. It's here. What you want to know is the recommendation of how to administer the drug and stay out of trouble. And that's in your rule as well. That's published in your rule book. It's available. If you can't find it, you can call us and we can give it to you. But there are recommendations of how to administer these drugs to keep your horse below that level. Most people don't even have to know that it's 15 micrograms for bute. It's relatively immaterial as long as you follow those recommendations. Well, for dexamethasone, it's also quantitatively restricted, and it has about 3 different ways you can administer it: time frames, doses, what may be specific for your horse, hives, that kind of thing. Very, very important to follow those. Lidocaine, mepivacaine, those 2 drugs are of the 13 conditionally therapeutic substances. 7 of them are the non-steroidals, and you have dexamethasone. Lidocaine and mepivacaine are actually forbidden substances. However, there is an exception for it. For the use of one of those 2 drugs is to sew up minor lacerations, which have to be identified and observed by either the competition management or the show veterinarian, the official show veterinarian. And I'll talk about that in a minute. Acetazolamide is a permitted medication. Again, it has recommendations as to how to administer it. Furosemide currently is one of the conditionally permitted therapeutic medications, and then isoxabrine. So these, we're going to call them 12 drugs, but they're really 13 because this is two local anesthetic agents. Those substances that I've just gone over in the last 2 slides, those are the only drugs that can be administered within the 24 hours prior to competing for AQHA. If you look at it that way, those are the only drugs that should be going into a horse or could be going into a horse. What's also important to understand is when we go to look at the non-steroidals, there's only 1 non-steroidal drug permitted to be in the horse at the time of competition. What we recommend is a 72-hour withdrawal. So if you've had a horse on 1 non-steroidal and you want to switch them to another, you can start the second non-steroidal, but you shouldn't compete until you've gone at least 3 days on just that new non-steroidal. So you've stopped the initial one. So let's say you're giving bute, and you get a gram or 2 of bute a day for a horse, and they have a little gas colic. You want to give them some flunixin, some bandamine. The recommendation would be that as soon as you give that dose of flunixin, you wait at least 3 days before you would compete the horse. Okay, and that gives it time to clear, so you wouldn't be in trouble. 2 non-steroidal drugs would not have been detected at the same time. And that's a very, very important deal. Again, you're not going to learn all of this in an hour. So if you have questions, you can definitely call or look it up online. I think that's one of the most important points, though, is only 1 non-steroidal before you compete, 72 hours before. Isoxaprine, the one caveat to this is also that should not be administered within 4 hours prior to competing. So found in the handbook, only recommendation, not the rule. And what I mean by that is the recommendation administration, that's a recommendation. So how you give it is a recommendation, whereas the amount that's detected in the horse at the time of competition, that's the rule. Okay, so 50 micrograms, if you exceed it, then you have an issue. It's important also to understand the different routes of administration. Giving a drug one way and then switching and giving the same amount of drug a different way can affect the level of drug in the horse, and it's very, very important not to do that. So they're very specific recommendations, and if you follow them, you won't have any problem. There's been a lot of work that go into coming up with these. These are not arbitrarily or capriciously thrown out there. There's a great deal of science that goes into determining them. And as I mentioned before, the caution against compound medications. There have been problems in the past with horses, like I mentioned, the polo ponies, but we have had positives for substances that when we went ahead and purchased a product that they had used, a compounded product, we actually found much more drug in it than was on the label. And so that's a risk that everyone runs. So then you get into the forbidden substances. So again, we had permitted, we had the quantitative restricted or the conditionally permitted therapeutic substances, and then we have forbidden substances. These drugs are things that should not be in the horse at the time of competition. The AQHA drug rule ties itself to the American Association of Racing Commissioners International, ARCI, where they actually look at all the medications, a number of medications, and they classify them. They classify them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then they also put them into a category for penalty structure. So under AQHA rules, any class 1 and 2 substances cannot be used at all. All right? If you remember, we talked about how one of the 3 pillars is we still allow treatment when appropriate and when necessary. Well, with the medication import forms, which I'll talk about, the class 1 and 2 substances still cannot be used. 1 and 2s are off the table. They're very easy to look up, and I would recommend everyone to maybe take a peek at that. Now, lidocaine and mepivacaine are class 2 substances. That's a fancy cell phone ring. So when I say that, the spotlight's off of me for a few seconds. So lidocaine and mepivacaine are class 2 substances under the ARCI classification. However, again, for the treatment, or I should say for the suture, the repair of a minor laceration, these 2 medications are permitted along with a medication import form, as long as the suturing and laceration is observed by competition management and or the official show veterinarian. There's no time frame for that. So I think that's actually, in my opinion, I think this is a great thing. We don't have this, and this is where I think we should have it. There are people that think there's too much of a potential for abuse, but with today's testing, I don't think there is. I really don't. But we'll have to wait and see. I'm glad that AQHA allows that treatment. And then, and again, as I point out, you have to have a medication report form filled out and applied. So some example, large classifications, stimulants, depressants, psychotropics, local anesthetics, all this good stuff. And then these are especially an issue in the horse show world. I think they've become less so over the last 10 years or so, but these were all the drugs of the day, 10, 15 years ago. Reserpine, flufenazine, Zuclop, Thixol. There have been positives for these substances at the Olympic Games. So it's not just typical levels of competition, even the very, very highest level of competition has had it. Some of these also have very, very dangerous side effects. Flufenazine, I can speak to that. I'd have back surgery thanks to this drug. About 20 plus years ago, we were actually working on it, trying to find a better way to detect it, administering it to horses, had a reaction, got in a wrestling match, I won the battle, lost the war, kept it from going through a big window, the horse, but blew out my back. So I have a particular dislike for that drug. So yeah. kind of scarred me, if you could say. So again, caution. When you hear these words, okay, so we talked about permitted, conditionally permitted therapeutics and forbidden substances. When you talk about supplements and other substances that may be pushed at a show venue or AEP or somewhere else, the buzzwords that really pop up to me that make me nervous are when I hear it's holistic, it's natural, it's organic, homeopathic, doesn't test. I mean, if they ever address it doesn't test, that should be your first tip-off. And then it's compounded. Well, natural products, cocaine comes from a plant, or serpine comes from a plant, marijuana, heroin, all these opium, all of these have a basis from plants. So the whole natural, it's a plant, it has to be harmless, is not true. Is not true. And the caution with supplements, and we're going to be developing, I think, a bigger program to explain supplements, kind of the 411 on supplements, is that they're not scrutinized to the level of a therapeutic drug. They don't go through the FDA screening to get approval. So that's why you always see this disclaimer on that. None of these statements have been evaluated by the USDA or the FDA, I should say. The FDA in regards to efficacy or treatment by a physician, what have you. So they always have the disclaimer on there. So what better way than to have a supplement work than to put a drug in it? If you're going to have a supplement for calming, what better way to make it work than to, I'm going to put a little something into it. And I'll talk about that in a second here, but this is just a funny picture slide. I don't know if you guys have ever showed at Louisville, at the Kentucky State Fair. Anyone from Kentucky here? I may be getting in trouble, but the problem was, so the veterinarian and the farrier, the problem was that not that this just didn't happen once, but they had the signs used for multiple years. So that was a bad thing. The state, I should say the veterinarian, had his sign also for his truck that said this, so he wouldn't use it. So now we talk about the exceptions. So you had permitted, restricted, and forbidden substances. However, we want to allow certain substances for legitimate therapeutic purposes closer to the time of competition to treat or diagnose existing injury or illness. Here are the conditions you have to meet to do so. So it has to be obviously for a legitimate therapeutic purpose, diagnosis or treatment of emergency or illness, has to be administered or / prescribed by a licensed veterinarian. And parts of your rule also mentioned they must be an AAEP member, American Association of Equine Practitioners member. They have to file out the appropriate AQHA medication report form. And this form documents a 24-hour withdrawal from competition. What's also important, you have to put the dose, the route of administration, why, what was the diagnosis that you're trying to treat, why were you administering this drug. And this is the form. Top part is about the horse and the trainer. The middle part is about the dose of the drug, the concentration of the medication, where you're administering it, how you're administering it. There's also up here has a caveat. It does explain that. Remember those quantitatively restricted drugs, those conditionally permitted therapeutics, where there's a level, specifically those 7 non-steroidal drugs and dexamethasone. This form doesn't apply. All right. Again, the level is what it is. It doesn't matter if you have a form or you don't. However, I will always tell people, when in doubt, if they miss this part and they want to turn it in for Butte, do it. When in doubt, fill it out. If it makes you feel better, fill it out. More information is always better. And then here you also have the veterinarian that prescribed it or administered it, as well as the person who did administer it. So if the veterinarian prescribed it, the person who actually administered the medication is the one that needs to sign that form. At the bottom, this is the documentation as far as when that form was received in comparison to also the time the medication was administered. And this is done in the show office. There are 3 copies of it. One goes to AQHA, one is retained by the owner trainer, and one is retained by show management. Eventually, the goal is that these will be available online. We've been rolling those out and using them. It's actually been very, very effective. What's nice about it is sometimes the veterinarian will do the treatment. They'll fill out the form, they'll hand it to the trainer, and the trainer will forget to turn it in. As unfortunate as that is, they forget to turn it in. Well, what we found is that if we provide this form online, veterinarians can fill it out when they do the treatment. They go in their truck, they get on their little terminal, they type it out, they put it in there, and they can submit the form. As soon as that form gets submitted, the individual gets an email response back with their copy of the form that it's gone into the database. What it also allows is that you're not dependent upon filing this form when the show office is open. You can file this form at any time, day or night, which is also very, very helpful. So hopefully that will be something that we're going to be rolling out here very soon. So some non-therapeutic medications. So even though we have those three classifications, there are certain forbidden substances that can be used therapeutically, use the medication report form, and you can get an exception. One thing to remember about that is that just because you file a medication report form doesn't completely, it's not a total get out of jail free card. And we mean by that is if you want to pick one of these drugs, I was giving reserpine for, the horse was being a jerk, so I gave reserpine. That's not a therapeutic purpose. And a medication report form would not be accepted for any of these drugs, okay? Does anyone know what GABA is? This is a medication, or I should say it's a inhibitory neurotransmitter that we've been dealing with. You all have it. You're sitting here with GABA in you. You probably didn't know it. And you didn't get it from breakfast. It's always there. But in horses, it's been administered to actually calm horses down and quiet horses. We've developed a testing strategy. We've been enforcing it for U.S. Equestrian. Guanabens, reserpine, flufenacine, valerian root, zuclopentixol. So those are drugs that would never be considered therapeutic in AQHA competition. There's no identifiable specific purpose for administering those drugs except for some of these reasons: clipping, shipping, stall rest, training, turning out, shoeing, and routine floating. A lot of people ask, why about the shoeing and routine floating for the use of a sedative or tranquilizer? And the reason is that it's always been considered these are more management issues, as well as the clipping. Those are all management issues. Those can be done. It's not an emergency. It's not something that has to be done right now. Now, a lot of people will say, well, I'm amazed at how many points show up when they get to the show on the teeth, and the teeth have to be floated, that kind of thing. But the intention is that the horses should be managed outside of competition, so those medications aren't necessary close to competition. So other medications that can cause a positive test: corticosteroids, dexamethasone. That's the Azium dexamethasone is the one I spoke about before. That's a quantitatively restricted corticosteroid. And when we talk about detection times, so 7-day withdrawal, 7-day withdrawal, 14-day withdrawal, these substances, these corticosteroids, those three right there, and most of them, what we're talking about, all three of those are legitimate therapeutic substances. The top one, as I mentioned before, dexamethasone, is controlled by plasma level. The other two are controlled by drug or plasma and urine samples. However, because they are legitimate therapeutic substances, those two medications, even though they have a 7 and 14-day withdrawal time, the reason that's published and the reason that's out there is because if you gave the drug 16 days ago for methylprednisolone, if you injected your horse's hocks 15 days ago, 16 days ago, what this means is there's no need to file a medication report form. So it's kind of like at the outside of that, you don't need it. You don't need to file that form, but it's important to understand if you medicated that horse, if you injected those joints at 5 days with methylprednisolone, if you injected those with Depo-Medrol 5 days out, and it's within that 14-day window, then you need to file a medication report form. All right? So what this is saying, this is how long we can detect things that, or I should say how long we can detect them at levels that we're concerned about. Because we can detect things a lot longer than this. And then obviously long-acting tranquilizers, because there has not been identified a legitimate therapeutic use for these medications, the recommendation is 90 days. okay? 90 days, and it used to be 45, and we had someone come back and say they gave it at 46. And so to make it very clear, it's not a legitimate therapeutic use of the medications. It was moved to 90, and there are others. Again, when in doubt, call us. When in doubt, fill out the form, but try and find out what you might be missing. So another medication, so going back to the compounded medication and supplements, this is just a little case history, okay? So this is a product called Cruise. It's by Bioagrico. It's actually produced in Belgium, I think it was. In the 2007 World Cup, we had a positive for this, for reserpine. The FEI, after a few halting steps, decided not to pursue it. We were opposed to that. We had detected the substance. It was our laboratory. 2007, the World Cup was in Las Vegas. We also had, 2 weeks before the World Cup, we had the same rider on a horse in Wellington that had a reserpine positive in a different horse. So the world champion on a different horse had a positive in Wellington. And we went forward with it. When we started investigating the case, we also had another reserpine positive from an eventer, I think it was in Montana. And this lady was very, very credible. And she said, I'm not giving anything to my horse. I just don't believe in it. And you really could pick up on that. So I said, well, here's the deal. What are you using? What have you given your horse? Supplement, feed, whatever. And this is what she was given. If you look at the label, it says it has a number of substances. If she would have called, we would have said, yes, you should not use that product. That would be forbidden in competition. The substances that are in there are intended to calm your horse. What it didn't have on the label was reserpine. But sure enough, reserpine was in the product. She sent us her product. We purchased the product on our own, and we found reserpine in a number of samples. So that company thought, you know what? I'm going to make something that works. I'm not going to stick with just the holistic, natural, herbal stuff. I'm actually going to put a drug in there. And sure enough, that's what happened. Because she was so helpful, we actually gave some mitigation to her penalty. But in the long run, what happened was when we went back and enforced that positive finding from Wellington on the World Cup rider, they had the B sample tested. We don't know where it came from. We don't know where it came from. Had the B sample tested. And as soon as tested, they said, well, we knew you were going to find that. And the reason being is because they were using a product called Tranquil 2. And some of the international veterinarians that may have worked on horses in Europe have heard about it. Tranquil 1, made by the same company, had reserpine in it. They came out with Tranquil 2. Again, the name tips you off. Tranquil. My French is terrible. But the Tranquil 2 also had reserpine in it. And so they were not surprised that there was a positive finding. At the end of the day, we ended up, this ended up being a violation for that rider. But again, natural supplements, sometimes you don't have to worry about what's on the label, but you have to worry about what's not on the label. And so I would always encourage a greater deal of scrutiny when you're involving products that seem too good to be true, especially those products that say do not test. Red flag, tremendous red flag. So when in doubt, everyone should write this number down. And I'll tell you, if you don't need to write it down because it's in your rule book. But this is a 1-800-MED, M-E-D, AHSA, which is our precursor organization. So MED, American Horse Shows Association, AHSA. It's been the same number for more than 35 or 40 years. So people say, why didn't you change that to USEF or MedUS or something? We don't want to mess anyone up. It's the same number. It's not changed. And I don't know if anyone else out here has an AOL account. Like, they're really still in this. Our email is medequestrian@AOL. So that shows you how long we've been receiving emails from about drug and medications questions. And in my office, we have, there are 4 of us. As I mentioned before, Diana, she's her 27th, 28th year of answering drug and medications questions. She's excellent. She's the voice of the Federation. She's the voice for the AQHA and answering questions, a number of those other organizations. It seems when we have someone come on board, they never leave. So we've got another 2 ladies have been there, one's 10 years, one's 6 years, and they're going to be the new Janice and Diana. And I think they're going to be lifers as well. So I would say I'm the leader, but they're the bosses. I'm outnumbered anyway. So as far as the 24-hour nature, it's very, very important that if you have a question about a drug or a medication, a scenario, the use of medication report form, that you call this number. Now, 24 hours, we'll answer it. Well, it goes to an answering service after business hours. They call one of us. We're all on call all the time to answer these questions. I'm lower down the phone tree, which is nice. But if you call up at 2 in the morning for a drug question about phenylbutazone and your horse is going to be competing in 3 months, it's not going to be answered in the same jovial fashion it would be if it was asked during business hours. I'll point that out. Sometimes we wake up grumpy. Sometimes we let them sleep, kind of thing. So we would encourage you to try and think ahead. Maybe if you have a question that's not an emergency, wait till the next business day. If you have a horse colicking at 2 in the morning and you want to know about a medication, that's the time to call. If they're competing the next several days. I also comment is we'll never tell you what you can use. We'll never say, oh yeah, you should use this drug. We're not in the business of providing medical advice, veterinary medical advice. We're not in the business of telling you options or what you can and can't use to treat a horse. We want the horse to be treated as appropriately as possible, whatever's in the best interest of the horse at that time. What we're there to do is to help you figure out how to get back into competition without breaking a drug or medication rule. That's what we're there to do. We're saying, we'll never say don't treat your horse. Treat your horse. We're just going to tell you how long you need to stay out of competition before you start back up so you stay out of trouble. Again, we'd rather educate than adjudicate anytime. So, future trends, I mentioned GABA, guanabens, the non-industry reviews. This goes back to the racing. Animal welfare groups, we're always on the front line. We're always being looked at and examined. And then there's also, in the last several years, and we've heard about the last 20 years, where the federal government's going to get involved in racing. And the next step is to take over, the show horse world, that kind of thing. I don't know if it'll ever happen, but I know that they keep scrutinizing what's being done in the field with regard to equine drug and medication control and racing. The RMTC, of which the AQHA is a member, I think has done a great job of trying to come up with some uniform medication rules for racing. Currently, I think there are 36 or 37 racing jurisdictions in the U.S. You can talk about confusing. So what they're trying to do is have all those jurisdictions on the same rules, rather than one horse competes in one state, races in one state, goes to the next state, and they have completely different rules. The AQHA for the show horses, sport horses, it's one rule whether you're competing in Florida, Alaska, Hawaii, which would be nice, California, and the like. And clenbuterol. I'm going to talk briefly about clenbuterol. 2014, this organization made it a forbidden substance November 1st, 2015, due to the potential abuses in AQHA. And this was not taken lightly. This was taken with a great deal of scrutiny and review. Number of medication report forms that were being filed in the halter area, some other groups, potential for abuse. So, I just want to point this out, that clenbuterol. Now, clenbuterol is also one of those drugs that you cannot use a medication report form for. It is completely eliminated from competition at the AQHA level, and the recommendation is a 60-day withdrawal. A 60-day withdrawal for clenbuterol. I just want to point that out. And that was since November 1st of 2015. So, I'm going to move to qualitative versus quantitative. And I've kind of touched on it. When we talk about those three classes, permitted, conditionally therapeutics, and forbidden substances, those conditionally therapeutic drugs, that is quantitative testing. In other words, how much is in the horse? You run the samples, you look at it, and you say, okay, X is in the horse. Is that above or below the line, whether it's a violation or not? Qualitative testing is the drug present? Okay? And it used to be that zero tolerance was if you found any drug, that was evidence of the horse having it in the system, shouldn't be competing, what have you. And that was when testing capabilities were much less than they are today. Now, I mean, we can go very, very low for drugs. And all the analytical chemists love to do that. It's like watching Name That Tune. You know, I can name it in 4 notes. I can name it in 3 notes. I can detect that drug out to 60 days. And everyone else is around there going, you know, find that drug. So that's what the chemists want to do. That's what they're geared. That's what they're programmed to do. However, what we have to understand is that the testing sensitivity has gotten so good that we're finding drugs much, much further out than there's a reasonable expectation that it has an effect. So that's what happens is then we get, besides just the analytical chemist, we get a pharmacologist, we get a veterinarian, we get a regulatory veterinarian, and the analytical chemist. We throw that group of 4 individuals in there, and we review findings. We review, and so we set that internally held limit saying, hey, you know what? Below this line, it's a negative. Anything above it, it's a positive. So there's really, the zero tolerance is not really, you know, if we find it, it's a problem. It's, we're not going to tolerate the use of medications to affect performance in horses. I mean, that is what that means. It's really not zero tolerance anymore whatsoever. These levels, frankly, are not a lot of times published or released. I can tell you they're very, very conservative. And what I mean by that is that we err on the side of caution when we call positives. And frankly, the reason that they're not released is what do they mean? We talked about phenylbutazone. We have a very prescriptive recommendation for administration. For all these other medications, we don't. It's timely, it's costly, and I'll explain that in a little bit. So while we don't have zero tolerance, we have a principle called strict liability. And this comes back to, and this is the same at all levels, from the Olympic levels down to the local horse show. In our opinion, strict liability is that, you know, regardless of how it may have gotten into the horse didn't have a say, so it had to have been administered, and we're guardians of the horse. So whoever's responsible in that situation, they're the ones going to be responsible for a drug and medication violation. I can tell you a story at the 2008 Olympic Games in Hong Kong with an American dressage rider who was found to have a drug called Felbinac in her horse at the time of competition. First I found out about was about midnight, and it was time change this and that. They were having hearing in like 8 hours over there, and so I'd never heard of the drug. Felbinac is a topical non-steroidal drug similar to Surpass, diclofenac, Felbinac. A lot of these drugs you can kind of pick up what their purpose is just by the name. So it's a topically utilized non-steroidal drug. In our research, no one knew about it. What we found out was most commonly produced in China and as part of a coupling agent in ultrasound gels. So this horse, 2 weeks before, had AFib, atrial fibrillation, not uncommon for horses, and had multiple ultrasounds. That's the hypothesis. At the end of the day, when they looked at this case, there's no other plausible way the drug could have gotten in the horse. Who knows? I don't know. They don't know. When the FEI tribunal reviewed the case, what they said was, we don't believe Miss Dye intentionally administered to this horse. We don't believe that this drug was administered to gain a certain advantage. However, due to the principles of strict liability, they had to hold her accountable. So the result was they took her down, which in fact disqualified the American dressage team for the Olympics, eliminated everyone, and that was the outcome of the case. So strict liability is out there, and it's important. Now, I will say there's also some mitigation, and the FEI in the last few years have really, they've looked into the principles of mitigation, and I think it's appropriate. And that means you take into context extenuating circumstances, the other things, but it's never going to eliminate a positive finding due to the principles of strict liability. So cutoff thresholds and screening limits of detections. Those are those levels I spoke about, kind of internally held by the laboratory. But I can tell you, being one of the FEI laboratories, a lot of these levels, for the FEI perspective, I can tell you that the levels we use for AQHA and USEF Equestrian are not necessarily the same that we use at FEI level. Okay, FEI level tends to even go lower. It's a different mindset, but they're harmonized among those 5 laboratories. So the same drug finding in the US would be the same as in the UK, as in France, or if the sample was taken from anywhere else. So the cutoffs, thresholds, and screening limits of detection are very important. Thresholds are more consistent with, or more appropriately applied to those substances that are naturally occurring, found in the environment. Caffeine is a great drug, okay? Well, it's a great drug. We're all awake this morning, but it's a great drug for an example. And the reason being is caffeine is ubiquitous. It's in brownies, it's in M&Ms, it's in coffee, it's in the back of the room. It's everywhere. And so horses are going to be exposed to it. So there's an internationally recognized threshold for caffeine. And once we apply that level, we get maybe, in all those 14,000 horses that we do a year, we get maybe 1 caffeine positive a year, maybe 1 every 2 to 3 years. We may have 2 or 3 in a year, but over the course of the sampling, it's very, very low because we have, in our opinion, an appropriately applied threshold. Do we find caffeine? Absolutely. It just doesn't exceed that level. So it's important that we have these in place. I can tell you a real quick story. Years ago, there was a caffeine positive in Florida racing, and the trainer said, it was racing, and the trainer said, I don't give my horse anything. I don't know where this is coming from. And he goes, but he does like M&Ms. And so they went ahead and said, okay, fine. So Dr. Sams, who I worked for, I was working for the flufenacine. I like M&Ms still, though. And so we would go get a bag of M&Ms out of the vending machine, crush up 20 of them, give it to the horse, and sure enough, it was enough to cause the horse to be positive for caffeine. So stay away from M&Ms. That might be the message here. So I would tell you real quick, development of quantitative restrictions, besides the poor spelling. We'll move that one to there for now. When we developed those quantitative restrictions, remember we had permitted, restricted, and forbidden. That 15 microgram level for phenylbutazone, as I mentioned, they're not arbitrarily designed or determined. This goes through a lot of scrutiny, a lot of research. A lot of horses are administered the medication. And so if I was to tell you the level's 15 micrograms, if you follow the recommendation, rarely will a horse be over 8 or 9 micrograms. That's pretty consistent, okay? Most horses would be 6 to 8 micrograms of phenylbutazone if you follow the posted recommendation in the rule book for administration of phenylbutazone. So when we get 20 micrograms, we know something happened. It didn't get administered at 12 and a half hours instead of 12, or I should say 11 and a half hours instead of 12. It's excessive, and there's something else that may have popped up. The other responsibility we have besides calling positives and looking and assuring there's nothing in the horse's sample is also when we do find something out there is to try and provide guidance of how to figure out where it came from. The worst than having a drug positive is having a second drug positive for the same drug. It's important to find out how that came about. This is just a picture of stable security or lack thereof. This is at the Kentucky State Fair several years ago. Walking down the barn aisle, no one around. This is open. I didn't open this. This is open. So I would encourage you. We do recognize that there are therapeutic medications to be used in and around competition. What's important is that I always tell people lock them up. Lock them up. Put them in a lock box. Have a very detailed order or process to get these medications out and to utilize them, and record what's being administered. So, some of the most common problems we have is one person administered and someone else came along and administered and they didn't know the first one had. And when you go back and you find it, you say, hey, you had 25 micrograms of phenylbutazone, you had 15 micrograms or what have you. They go, well, I don't know what happened. They go back and they talk to their people, and sure enough, 2 people may have administered the same amount of drug. So, selection of competitions. For USEF, I select them. The veterinarian selects the day. It's changing. We're doing more directed testing. And what this is important about is how random it truly is. AQHA, what happens is AQHA sends us a list of requested dates but some alternates. So at the end of the day, the AQHA really doesn't know where we're testing. They give us a couple opportunities and potentials, narrow it down for us, but we're the ones that actually assign the testing veterinarians and that kind of thing. And then, factors involved with getting horse shows tested have to do with the availability of testing personnel, location, the distance. We've tested in Alaska before for AQHA. We've tested just about everywhere. And then obviously if there's a smaller number of horses, it may not have as great a likelihood of being tested. So the timeline, I'm going to wrap this up here real quick. A timeline, samples received in the laboratory. So everything gets shipped in. The laboratory is blinded. There's an initial screening process. It's then confirmed by a second method in the laboratory. The laboratory, as I mentioned, is Lexington, Ohio. My office is Lexington, Kentucky. My office is in Columbus, Ohio. So we're even separated. So the laboratory, all they do is they get a sample that has a barcode on it. And it says XYZ459. And they analyze it, and then they go, hey, there's something here. And so then they prepare a report to us. It comes to the Ohio office. We have the sample ID card that people fill out in the competition. The only thing that goes with sample is that little barcode. We have the card. We match up the two numbers to determine who, where, what, when, and how that sample was collected. And we also evaluate the level. The laboratory is told, find everything. We have an additional level of scrutiny. Like I mentioned, the analytical chemists can be a little overzealous. We tend to pull them back, and we're going to apply the levels that are appropriate. And then we notify the AQHA. So laboratory notification, they're blinded, match the sample card. The AQHA will then review with the filed medication report forms to see if something was filed, and they'll determine whether or not the administration of the finding is compliant with the rule. And if it is a suspected finding, we'll forward it on, obviously. And then there's a letter of request. So it's requested that the member, the respondent, provide some sort of documentation or explanation. I always call a letter of finding, it's a notice. It's like, hey, this is what we found. Tell us about it. Do you have any input on it? Do you have any explanation as to why we may have found this in the horse? And then once that response comes back, it's reviewed by a number of different groups. Possible outcomes is a warning. In other words, no violation. Could be a violation, could be handled a warning, could be an administrative penalty, and it could also go to a hearing. So bottom line is know the rules, know where to find them. And then my last little plug is the Equine Disease Communication Center. Has anyone gotten online here? Has anyone seen it? If you haven't, by the end of the day, you should. Okay? This is, in my opinion, in the last 4 or 5 years, this is the greatest thing going for equine disease surveillance. What's the one thing? A drug and medication violation is going to knock one person out of the industry. A biosecurity issue, an infectious disease outbreak, will knock a heck of a lot more out than one. That's, in my opinion, that's one of the most damaging potential problems in our industry. If you shut a horse show down, has anyone followed the AQHA or the California herpes outbreak over the Christmas, all that good stuff? I mean, it shut down at competition grounds. The cutting horse outbreak I think it was in 2010. The bottom line is it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. The Equine Disease Communication Center is a product of AAEP, American Horse Council, AQHA, US Equestrian, and a number of other organizations. And what this is a central clearinghouse for infectious diseases information, whether it's a biosecurity alert, whether an infectious outbreak, or it has information as far as the diseases specifically, and it's improving every day. So this is the one potential assault to the industry that could be the most damaging, in my opinion. I would encourage you to go on the website. So you probably can't see that very well. I probably should have rethought that. But just type in Equine Disease Communication Center, and you can sign up to get alerts. So let's say they have a horse that comes down with herpes outbreak in a certain state or whatever. It gets posted, you get an alert. All right, and it's very, very important. What you find out is you didn't know how much stuff was really going on out there, okay? And why it's important is to be informed, as when we take horses across the country from venue to venue, we're opening ourselves up for risk. And so this is a great central clearinghouse. The information comes in from the state veterinarian, comes in from whoever, and is posted immediately. It's short, it's succinct, it explains about the different disease process. It explains about vaccinations. You can actually use, there's a map on here you can pull up and you can get the state veterinarian, their contact information. What it does is it cuts down on the rumor and innuendo of social media. Because, one person says, oh yeah, 3 horses were sick here, and it gets processed. The next thing you know, a whole herd's down, and 10 of them died, and, 3 are crippled and what have you. This is where you go for the information. It's important. The next step is also, what are you going to do with this information? And that's what they're working on. All right, so any questions? I'm sorry I'm a few minutes over, but any questions from anyone out there?
I probably wouldn't either, but after listening to you for the last hour, I'm wondering if you have any extra medication forms so I can give my neighbors, because there's certainly a lot of information dispensed here.
Yeah, I would tell you, the question where you're asking the accessibility of medication report forms, the information, how to get this information out to others. There are different media tools or different written information, and I can work with the AQHA also to get something easier to send out. But the bottom line is, if you have a question about drug and medication, call us, email us. You have people that have been answering these questions longer than anyone else in the world, specific to the AQHA. You have a tremendous resource. Utilize it. Medication report forms are available online as well, and hopefully we'll be bringing them on. I'm sorry, they're available on the AQHA website currently, and hopefully soon they'll be available online. Any other questions?
You mentioned you were going to talk about equox versus prevocox.
Okay. Sounds good. So the question is about the difference between equiox and prevocox. And I think we've been into it now a number of years. I think most people understand the difference. If you don't, I'm going to go over here quickly. So equiox, I never know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, equiox, is the horse-approved product with a drug called firocoxib. It's a coxib class drug, more specific. It's supposed to be safer, in my opinion. I believe it is. It's generally used for osteoarthritis. It was brought out in 2007, I believe. Well, at the same time, they had a drug called Prevocox, which is the brand name for firocoxib. That's the dog drug. And that drug was already on the market. So what happened was, when they brought the drug out, the cost for equiox was a good bit more than Prevocox. And people realized, well, hey, Prevocox, I can get this for my dog and use it in my horse. It's the same drug. And they're right to a certain extent. The difference is, this is a great example of the difference in pharmacokinetics between species, that you can't always extrapolate one way or the other the way a drug will react. A lot of times they work very, very similar, but we have to recognize that drugs work differently. So 227, there are 2 sizes of Prevocox, 227 milligrams and 57 milligrams. 227 milligram tablet, I think it's enough for a 100-pound dog once a day, oral, okay? 100-pound dog, 227 milligrams. The recommended therapeutic dose for firocoxib, or equiox, in a horse is 45 and a half, or 45.4 milligrams a dose. So you have a 1,000-pound horse getting 45 milligrams a day, and a 100-pound dog, a tenth of the size, is getting 227 milligrams a day. And what it does is it explains, it's a great example of different rates of bioavailability. In other words, how much, when you give it drug orally, how much does it get into the bloodstream and go to sites to be effective? And also the metabolism and pharmacokinetics of drugs. So pharmacology is a broad window of pharmacodynamics and pharmacokinetics. Pharmacodynamics is what the drug does to the species, the person, the horse, the dog. And pharmacokinetics is, what does the person, horse, or dog do to the drug? How does it eliminate the drug? So you take a drug, and it works for a certain period of time, and it's gone. Well, how does the body get rid of it, regardless of species? So those are the 2 branches. So while it may have the same pharmacodynamic effect between species, it may have a different pharmacokinetic profile. It may go faster, it may get out of the system faster, it may be delayed, may not be absorbed as well. But a big difference, 1,000-pound horse, 45 milligrams, 200 or 100-pound dog, 227. So what we had was people started using the 227, and they said, oh, I'm only going to give them a half a tab. Well, half a tab represents 2.5 times overdose, or I shouldn't say overdose, 2.5 times the recommended dose for Equiox in a horse. Just a half of the dog tab. And the 57 milligram tablet is enough drug, the dog drug, Previcox, is also in the 57. That's enough for a 20-pound dog once a day. That is still an overdose by 20% over what a horse is supposed to get, a 1,000-pound horse. So as you can understand, we've had some findings, we've had some positives. What most of them have been is from the half tab of a 227, or people using straight 227 milligrams each time. What's nice is the manufacturer has actually come out with a 57 milligram tablet that was designed for horses. And for most of you, most of your horses, it's appropriate, in my opinion. I mean, it's close enough. And the reason being is I don't think there are many Western pleasure horses that are 1,000. They're going to be usually 1,100, 1,200 pounds, sometimes more, where the 57 milligram tablet may be closer to it. It's cheaper, as I understand it, than the Equiox. My recommendation always would be, while in competition, I would use the paste. I would use the Equiox paste, the one that's approved for use in horses, just to eliminate any sort of potential finding by using the tablets. That's my recommendation. I think that's an important one. We've had numerous Previcox or Furicoxib positives, so that's another take-home message. In my opinion, while in competition, use the paste. So, any other questions? Sorry, I'm a little verbose for a veterinarian. I apologize. Well, thank you. Dr. Burwash.
Stephen, as far as the clearance of toxin, you mentioned that 72 hours is the recommendation so you don't get caught with two non-steroidals. Is that because of the slow metabolism and clearance, is that adequate, or should we be recommending a little bit longer time?
No, that's a great question. The question was, I mentioned 72 hours from the changeover from one non-steroidal to the next. And Furicoxib does have a different pharmacokinetic profile. They all have different pharmacokinetic profiles. In other words, how long they stick around, how long they last, what have you. In that drug, Furicoxib, if you're in California, the level is so low that they may say 14-day withdrawal. And we can detect these drugs much further out. This is an example, though, where we have an internal level that if you're 3 days off that drug, the level for that drug that we say this is a second non-steroidal drug has been very, very consistent. In other words, 3 days would apply for Furicoxib as well. So if you've been on Furicoxib, you've been on Equiox, and you want to switch to Butte, you can have, on Monday, you've been giving Furicoxib for 10 days. All right, and the 10th day is Monday. And you give it Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Wednesday, you want to give a shot of, or a dose of Butte. As long as you don't compete Thursday, Friday, and into Saturday, you'd be fine on only just the one. Because then at that time, you're only going to have Butte on board. The Furicoxib is going to be long gone.
So can I ask a follow-up to that? So that's if you're using an appropriate dose of Equiox for the horse.
That's a great comment. Yeah. So here's the other issue with Furicoxib. It's an injectable form as well. And sometimes what happened, other issues we've had was there have been recommendations that you give 2 or 3 times a loading dose on day one, and then you start up on the normal one. And we have had findings with that as well. So you would not want to start that non-steroidal drug, specifically Furicoxib, with an injectable loading dose or oral loading dose, and then go compete your horse the next day.
Or if you have a horse that's significantly under, so the 57 milligram tablet treats up to a 1,300 pound horse. It treats up to a 1,300 pound horse. If you have a really halter horse, or a horse that's significantly under that weight range, and you've been using the tablet, that also I think could affect that.
Absolutely.
As well. Because
Can
you're
you-
technically overdosing that horse. Maybe not to the level that it would be picked up from as a positive on that horse, maybe, but you're overdosing that horse, which is going to allow the drug to remain in the system possibly a little longer.
Absolutely. So does everyone hear that? So let's say you have that 57 milligram tablet that is specified as Equiox, it's for horses, and that's up to a 1,300 pound horse. What if you've been administering that full tablet or a large portion of it to a baby or a younger horse a horse that's 800 pounds, okay? That is an excessive dose, and you need to observe an additional withdrawal time for that horse. Sometimes it's going to be much longer. We don't know. We can't evaluate every scenario, but I don't know if you could tell, but she's helpful because from the drug company, so. Which I have to applaud for coming out with the oral version of this drug for horses at a cheaper rate, which I think is great. I like the drug for horses. All right, any questions? Thank you again. Sorry to run over. I appreciate your time. And, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Schumacher. And Dr. Schumacher, I have to commend you. This is the first time, the very first time, both Jim Searles and Kelly McDowell stayed awake through a full presentation. So I'm really proud of you guys. I mean, I had Rob McNeely and Tom Macbeth back here to kick them if they started snoring, but they both stayed awake. So we're good. Also, I forgot to mention before Robin, man, I'm proud of you. Thank you for stepping up. And we are going to have a great leader with Robin in the Pro Horseman. And he shares a passion, for this industry that we all do. So I look forward to great things from Robin. Our next presenter, Shamarr Prentice, is an Assistant Vice President and Financial Solutions Advisor for Bank of America Merrill Lynch. His primary responsibilities include assessing customer goals by conducting financial opportunity sessions with new or existing clients, leveraging business knowledge to determine prudent and appropriate strategy to meet clients' needs by recommending financial solutions, and constantly staying abreast on current client relationships through focusing on life changes, employment changes, financial needs, and goals. He has been in the financial industry for 7 years after earning his Master's of Art degree in the Organizational Management Economics from Wayland Baptist University and his Bachelor's Science degree in Business from Tarleton State University. Prior to joining Bank of America Merrill Lynch, Shamarr was a financial advisor for Edward Jones and a private client advisor for Wells Fargo. Shamarr lives in San Antonio with his wife Jennifer and 2 children, Ty and Caroline. Please welcome Shamarr Prentice.
Good morning. How's everyone doing? Good. Thank you for having me. Really appreciate being here today to speak with you guys on some financial fundamentals. So as you were saying, my name is Shamarr. I'm sorry, I have to stay here on the camera. I'm used to walking out. So as I said, my name is Shamarr Prentice. I'm a financial advisor with Bank of America Merrill Lynch. I've been asked to come here today to speak to you guys a little bit on financial fundamentals, which I'm really looking forward to. It'll be a high view. We won't get too in depth whereas though I'm gonna confuse everyone. So we'll take a high level view of some things that you could take back with you in your everyday life as far as take back with in your financials. So as I said, I'm a financial advisor with Bank of America Merrill Lynch. Basically with my job, my detail with the company, I'm a dual employee of both Bank of America and Merrill Lynch. So basically what that means for my clients, I can help them with just about everything. On the Bank of America side, I do the auto loans, the basic deposit, checking, savings accounts. And on the Merrill Lynch side is where I do majority of my work, which is the stocks, the bonds, the mutual funds. And of course, products offered by Merrill Lynch or FDIC insured, backed by the bank or any government agency. And they do fluctuate in principal value. So if anyone asks, I did give you that disclaimer about the market, okay? So, your finances. What Bank of America put together, we sent a survey out to just about all our clients, and basically we try to figure out what's important to them. And we started to get a lot of the same answers back, so a lot of repetition in answers. And we put together this here diagram in which we call our life priorities. So this basically what our clients prioritize in their life. Those life priorities, it's your finances. Finances are key to helping you reach your goals. And what we try to do at Bank of America Merrill Lynch is make that easier for you. And some of the feedback we got from our clients, and sorry, you may not be able to read them all, some of the life priorities such as family. So, when it comes to finances and your family, we're talking about, creating the wills, just leaving money for your heirs and things of that nature. Also, we go to giving. That's to your charitable organizations, to your churches, and things of that nature. Of course, work. Switching jobs. Leaving the old 401ks, going to a new one. Home, purchasing new home, refinancing the current home, purchasing rental property, land, and things. Leisure, some things that we all like to do. Sometimes we don't always get to do it. But vacations, whether it's annual vacations, semi-annual vacations. But we try to help you with your finances, be able to make sure you be able to do those things that you like to do. And your health, of course, one of the most important, healthcare costs. I'm sure everyone here is familiar with healthcare costs. It continues to go one way, and that's up. Don't see that changing. But those are some things that we like to sit down with our clients and kind of get a grasp of what's going on in the healthcare world and create your finances to be able to cover those expenses, whether they're unexpected or expected. So today's agenda, as I said, today's agenda is going to be a high-depth view of finances. So just some basics that you could take back with you. Of course, after this presentation, if you do have specific questions, we want to get into more detail, I'll be more than happy to sit and meet with you guys. Today's agenda, we'll talk about setting goals, budgeting basics, building an emergency fund, one of my favorite conversations, managing debt, saving for college, and planning for retirement. So those are some of the things that we're going to discuss today. So this is a financial wellness quiz. I'm not going to pass out this quiz. I'm just kind of ask you guys, kind of keep the number in your head. Just by a show of hands, though, how many folks would say they always follow a budget? And the key word is always. That's honest. That's the most honest audience I've ever seen in my life. How many folks say they have an emergency fund? Good. How many folks would say their debt is under control? Okay, good. Pay off credit cards in full each month? There we go. Good. We'll talk about interest rates and credit cards as well. How many folks are helping to save for college or grandchildren or children? How about that cost? You like that one? That's another one that increased with healthcare, right? And then putting money aside for retirement. How many folks are actively doing that, whether it's the 401k, retirement? Now, I didn't see a lot of hands on that one. So everyone may want to talk to me after this seminar. In this, if you score between 6 to 12, obviously you're going to find a lot of good information in this. 12 to 24, you're pretty much on the right track. And if you scored 24 or more, you're in really good shape. But don't leave. I want you to still stay. So financial fundamentals, setting goals and creating a budget. By show of hands, how many folks believe a budget is doable and it's very important to your everyday finances? Good. So, setting goals and creating a budget. There was a French poet in the early 1900s, and I remember this poet from when I was getting my undergraduate. And I know his name. Unfortunately, I can't pronounce it. I said he was a French poet, so it's a lot of letters in there I can't pronounce. But he said, a goal without a plan is just a dream. And I kind of take that back to me when I sit with my clients and we're talking about creating a budget to meet whatever expenses come up, whether it's retirement or large expenses. So just think about that. A goal without a plan is just a dream. If your plan or your goal is to, retire with $1 million, $500,000 in retirement, and that's just your goal, but you have no plan to get there, that's a dream. So, I sit with my clients and we create the foundation as far as getting to that goal. So with Merrill Lynch, we taken when creating the goals, we have three different tiers. We have short-term goals, medium-term goals, and then the long-term goals. Things in the short-term goals are going to be, expenses that you have within 1 or 2 years, such as setting up an emergency fund. Just throw out that question. Does anyone know how much, it's recommended to keep in an emergency fund?
3 to 6 months.
That's cheating. That's without kids. Anyone know the answer with kids? 6 to 9 months. So Maryland, as we say, 6 to 9 months if you do have children to keep in that emergency fund. And the key word in that is emergency fund. So that random staycation or weekly vacation, that's not emergency. All right. I know everyone's from different places here, but I know in San Antonio a few months back we had a bad hailstorm. I lost 2 cars in that hailstorm. It's the worst hailstorm. Neither one of them was my cars. Both of them were my wife's. The first hailstorm got her car the first time, went and got another one, and she got caught in the second one. So I asked her to switch jobs so she didn't have to drive that same path anymore. Didn't work. Another short-term goal, buying a car. And then, of course, taking those vacations. So those are the short-term goals. Medium-term goals, between 3 to 10 years, paying down debt. I know a lot of folks raised their hand when they said they paid down debt or pretty much had their debt under control, which is good. Buying a house. Anyone know what the interest rates are going on homes? Going up or down? There we go. Going up. Interest rates are increasing. So if you're looking to purchase a home, may want to look forward to doing that pretty soon. Or creating a fund to pay for education expenses. Now, in my opinion, education is increasing drastically as far as costs. It's going to start moving to the long-term goal because it's going to take a long time to be able to pay those things off. And then our long-term goals are 10 plus years, and those are things like planning for retirement and paying off those mortgages. That's a sheet, so I explained everything. I knew you weren't going to be able to see that, so that's why I talked. So how can a budget help? All right, so as we said, the budget, basically you want to build some foundations on creating that budget. The budget is going to be the step-by-step plan for meeting your goals, whether short-term, medium-term, or long-term goals. A way to organize your money. Just by a show of hands, how many folks know how much money comes in but don't know how much goes out? You see that a lot, right? You know exactly how much comes in, but some reason it disappears. It goes somewhere else, and we're not sure where it goes. So, those are the things the budget kind of helps you. Gives you a sense of control of your money and how to build better spending habits, and of course, may reduce stress. Financials is a very stressful situation, so creating that budget, and of course, meeting with an advisor if need be to help you create that budget. So step one, as we said, identifying your income. So regular paychecks, whether it's monthly, biweekly, semi-monthly, understanding where the money's coming in from you or your spouses. Other possible income sources. So if you do have investments, things that you get from dividends, interest, alimony, in that case is rental income, of course, and then self-employed income. And then, of course, the frequency of income. So understanding how often the money's coming in. Just really getting understanding of when your money is coming in to build that budget. Again, that'll be the foundation of your finances. So step two, track your spending each month. So this goes back to my question, how many folks know where your money goes after it comes in? So tracking the spending each month. How many folks eat out? Buy coffee? I saw those hands really, really low. It's okay. We all do. I saw some waistband hands there. So really understanding where the money goes. Reviewing your monthly checking statement. So what we try to have our clients do for one whole month, write down every place that your money goes. Okay, that way when we revisit the following month, we kind of go over everything. We know exactly where your money's coming in and where your money is going, and it really gives you an understanding of where your money goes. If you never really look at your statements, you never really have a true understanding of how you spend your money. And then, of course, carry a notebook to write down, everything you spent. So, a deposit slip that you get from the bank. Adding up your monthly expenses. This is just an example. So after 1 or 2 months, add up all of your expenses for the month. divide your expenses in a category. So, you know, where there's dining, leisure activities, and things of that nature. Consider if the expenses are fixed or flexible. So, you know, fixed expense, a mortgage, you know, car insurance, those are fixed expenses, rent insurance and things like that. So the monthly expenses, again, just an example, rent insurance, $2,000, food, personal care items, $500, bills, $500, credit card payments, and then the extra. So total expenses for this example is $3,600. What we do, we compare the income and expenses. So the monthly expenses, as we said, $3,600. You know, the monthly income, of course, it's not a lot of expenses. It's pretty straightforward. You know, go off wages and self-employment. So $3,200, and kind of you can understand your gap. So obviously, you want your gap to always be a surplus. All right, if it's in the red, then we need to reevaluate those expenses that's coming in. Again, this is just an example. So, freeing up cash for savings, you know, some of the things we recommend, carry small amounts of cash to limit spending. How many folks carry cash? Okay, so good. Some folks do. A lot of people don't. You know, you have the debit card now, but you do want to carry some type of cash. Packing your meals, eating meals at home. You know, something that I still need to focus on. You know, I'll pack my lunch and I'll still go buy lunch. So I don't know how that works. You know, in my mind I'm doing it, but you know, it kind of stays there, and then I'll come back around to it a day or two. You know, shop around, use coupons. My wife is awesome at this. I don't have the patience for it. Some people don't, but you know, using the coupons do help quite a lot. I'm a big fan of it once I actually see the result. I'm just not a big fan of sitting there finding them. So, pay your bills on time and avoid banking, ATM, and credit card fees. You know, that's a big one, and we'll get a little bit more into some interest rates, you know, on credit cards and things as the presentation go on. And avoid shopping for fun. Sometimes, right? So sometimes. That's easily said than done, but avoid shopping for fun, but only when you need. So this is just an example of what to do for a month. Try to do this for a whole month. That's a long time for some people. Sometimes it's not short enough. And of course, do it yourself if possible. If you break something in the house and you do it yourself, please know what you're doing before you try to fix it, because that expense can start to increase on you. So that's a big one. Do it yourself if possible. So budgeting tools, monthly payment schedule on a calendar. You know, we highly advise using that. Understanding, you know, payment dates and due dates, expense envelope system, a budget box system, and of course a computer spreadsheet if you like to use the computers. I like the spreadsheet. It works out pretty good. So, financial fundamentals, build an emergency fund. So by show of hands, how many folks have an emergency fund? Good. Do you touch it often? No? Good. There was some slow no's there. So creating that emergency fund. So like we said, 6 to 9 months if possible. Could be longer depending on your expenses. Paying yourself first, you know, is a big one. Establishing a regular savings plan, so savings account, money market savings accounts, you know, CDs. I'm sure you're familiar. Interest rates are not very attractive on CDs, but that is a way of paying yourself back. Of course, retirement plan contributions. You know, I can't stress that enough to prepare for retirement. As an advisor, I see a lot of clients who are prepared for retirement, and I see a lot of clients that are in the midst of retirement but not really prepared for retirement. So those conversations go a lot of ways there. So deciding on a goal, initially $5,000 to $100,000 in that emergency fund. You know, long-term 3 to 6 months of regular living expenses with no children, and then 6 to 9 months if you have children. Of course, that 6 to 9 can increase depending on how many children you have and how much spending you do for the children. So why create an emergency fund? We spoke on this a few times, so now, paying for extra expenses without derailing your savings plan. So unexpected expenses. The true purpose of emergency fund is that unexpected expenses. I'm sure most of you guys understand that medical expenses, that is a true unexpected expense. That's something that we all, will succumb to as some type of medical expenses. Expenses that occur once or twice a year. Avoid paying interest and fees charged when paying with a credit card. So, going back to paying off those credit cards in full each month. We'll talk about that a little bit more, when it comes to building credit as well. Prevent future financial setbacks by creating that cushion, okay? So, continue to contribute to that emergency fund. You have to deplete it for some reason. Don't stop. Continue to accumulate assets in that fund. Of course, being patient. Not everyone's able to put that much money in an emergency fund right away. So have to be patient and keep moving forward in that aspect. So how to build that emergency fund? Determine how many months of expenses you'll need. Again, we have our rough estimates, 3 to 6 with no children, 6 to 9 with children. But each individual is going to have different expenses. So some expenses are more than others. So your emergency fund may be a little bit more, or may need to be a little bit more. Open emergency accounts. So those are the things like the CDs, the money market savings accounts. And again, you're not going to get a lot of interest on it right now. If you want the interest on the savings account, get on the phone with me and we can call up the Fed and ask them to increase interest rates right now. It's going to take a minute. And then find additional funds in your monthly budget. So, cutting off some of those expenses. So, for me, cutting that going out to eat lunch all the time, even though I have my lunch with me. My lunch is my emergency fund. That's if I can't leave the office and I actually have to stay there. So that's what I use that for. Using your savings only when necessary. So, managing debt. How many folks feel as though they had their debt in control? Okay. Debt changed drastically, doesn't it? You be in control one day and something pop up and you feel like, man, what happened? You're right. So managing debt. So trivia question, the impact of debt on your finances. So here's the question. How long would it take to pay off $5,000 in credit card debt at 20% interest if you make only the minimum payments? So throw out some answers. Forever, that's close enough. 7 years? 12 years? How much? How much do you think you'd pay in interest? Twice the bill? Yeah, that's about right. So the answer, 24 years. All right, that blows your mind, doesn't it? So to pay off a $5,000 credit card debt at 20% interest, just making a minimum payment, it'll take you 24 years to do so. That's a long time to pay off $5,000. And you'll end up paying an additional $8,100 in interest. So it is double, just about double the amount that you have or more. So, managing that debt, credit card debt can jump up on you. I don't think there's a such thing as a good credit card interest rate. I'm not sure. I haven't seen one yet, but they typically are pretty high. So maintaining good credit. So having some debt is not bad. So just a trivia question. If you're trying to build credit, would you pay your credit card off in full each month? I hear some whispers. So the question is, if you're trying to build your credit, you want your credit score to increase, would you pay your credit card off in full each month? That's right. So what are the credit bureaus looking for? They're looking for what? Consistency of making payments, all right? If you pay it off in full, they don't see the consistency. It's good for you because you're managing debt. So that's why we say, having some debt is not all that bad. Don't let it be out of control. We try to say stay under 30% if you can of a credit card limit, 50% in extreme cases, but try to stay under 30%. But if you are in a position where you're trying to build credit, you want to leave some type of balance on there. So the credit bureaus, the Equifax, the TransUnion, Experian, they can see that consistency of making monthly payments. Unfortunately, you have a car, you make monthly payments, that's never reported to the credit bureaus. You miss the payment, it gets reported to the credit bureaus. You make your utility payments, that's not reported to the credit bureaus. You miss the payment, it gets reported to the credit bureau. So it's a little one-sided on a lot of things. So, why do you need good credit? Of course, to secure financing for major purchases. So we talk about that emergency fund. Emergency situation pops up. You don't have enough assets in an emergency fund. That's when you need the credit to help you. Credit scores influence those interest rates, of course. So those auto loans, those mortgage rates, and things of that nature, land. Some employers, of course, do credit checks. To maintain good credit rating, make all payments on time. You don't want to be late. Don't go over your credit limit. So don't go over your credit limit, but again, I emphasize if you can, try not to use more than 30% of your credit limit. In extreme cases, no more than 50. If you do, try to pay it down for the actual monthly bill, because that does get reported to the credit bureaus. Don't let your balances get too high, and don't apply. Credit score is good only when you don't use it. So when you start applying for it, it starts to go down. It's like I said, it's pretty one-sided. When you need it, it hurts you. but when you don't need it, that's usually when you get all the banks to mail you pre-approvals, right? That's when you need it. Okay. So monitoring your credit standings, know your FICO score. Is anyone have any accounts set up with any of the credit bureaus to kind of keep you up to date on what's going on in your credit? Some? Okay. So the three credit bureaus, Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion, it is a good idea to have an account with at least one of them. So basically any type of applications on your credit, you'll get monitored. Also, you can always call and ask for your credit score and credit report, whatever you need be. Of course, you're obligated to get one free annual credit report annually. So that's a good thing. Of course, and that's the phone number for them. I'm not a credit doctor. I just know credit. So can't come to me today and say I want my credit score to be 800. I can't tell you exactly how to do that. I can tell you how we can help you get there. So using credit wisely, if you find yourself in too much debt, stop using the credit cards. Avoid that. Unfortunately, taking out more loans to pay off another loan is not the best option. I'm sure everyone's probably heard that saying one time. You're robbing Peter to pay Paul. It leaves one hand and goes another, but the debt stays there. It just goes to a different person. So really understanding that. But if you can consolidate debt to get to a lower interest rate, that's ideal. Of course, when you do consolidate those debts, don't go use the credit card and move them back up again. Okay. Finding credit cards with lower interest rate, easier said than done. Really not too much of a good interest rate on a credit card. Interest rates are really high on credit cards. And when you pay off a credit card, put that money toward paying another one. In a few slides, we're going to talk about some ways to pay off high interest rate credit cards and things like that. Seek help from consulting services. Be wary of a service that you do hire. Pretty much they all do the same thing. They send challenges, but you want to make sure they're active on those challenges because you do pay monthly fees to them. And saving for purchases rather than using credit. So that's going back into the emergency fund scenario. To save for a purchase. Of course, if you have the credit available to you, you can just go pay for it right now, but then you'll be paying interest on it. If it's not something that you need right away, and you can make payments on it or just save for it, that would be the ideal way. I would say that's number one. That's correct. So that's very ideal. Again, the credit scores they can drop in a day, and it takes months and months to build back up. Like I said, it's a one-sided deal. So paying down debt. Two ways we would like to discuss: the snowball effect and the high interest rate method. How many folks pay off their debt with the highest interest first? Okay. Has anyone ever heard of the snowball effect? Okay, good. I got a few. There we go. A lot of people are always confused about the snowball. So, snowball effect or low balance method. All right. So, the snowball effect, you list your debt in order of amount owed. Okay, from the smallest to the largest. Each month, you make the largest payment you can afford to the debt with the lowest balance. So the credit card with the lowest balance, you make the highest monthly payment that you can afford, and you pay that credit card. While the other cards, you're just making the minimum payments on those cards. And I know before you're probably thinking, Shamarr, you're contradicting yourself. You said don't make the minimum payments, pay a little bit more. We'll get to it. So continue making that minimum monthly payments on all other debt. When that debt's paid off, repeat the process with the next smallest amount owed. So, for example, let's say the smallest debt, your monthly payment is $25, but you're making a $200 monthly payment on that card. All right, that card's going to be paid off pretty fast because you're paying way more than the minimum owed. Once that card's paid off, you move over to the next card with the next minimum debt. You build from that $200. You don't go down to the minimum from the next card. You build from the $200, and the most that you can make on the next card, you increase that with your $200. So that $200 monthly payment may move up to $350 monthly payment. And you continue that on and on until you finish with your credit cards. Okay, so that's the snowball effect. It works pretty fast. The high interest rate method, I'm sure this is the one that's used most often. You pay off the credit card with the highest interest rate. Again, listing those debts in order of interest rates from highest to lowest. Each month, make the largest payment you can afford with the debt with the highest interest rate. And then continue making that monthly payments on all our other debt, and then you just continue to the next debt with the highest interest rate. What's the average interest rate for a credit card? Does anyone know? Throw out the answers. There are no wrong answers. 20. That's right. 20% is the average. So each month, of course, make the large payment. So when the debt's paid off, you move over to the next one. This method genuinely results in paying less in interest and thereby saving you more money over time. So what can you do with that extra money? Put into that emergency fund, right? Or pay it to other expenses. So those are the two effects: the snowball effect and the high interest rate. So just about everyone's familiar with the high interest rate. Not too many folks are familiar with the snowball. So financial fundamentals, saving for the future. Okay, so just throw out some answers. What are some long-term investment goals from the audience? Go ahead. No wrong answers. College savings. Okay. Children, grandchildren, or yourself. What else? Retirement. There you go. That's the key one. That was the big one. Yeah, that's the big one. Yeah. So yeah, and I understand that. So I'm not in the horse business. I went to school. I got my bachelor's degree in Stephenville, Texas. Anyone know what Stephenville, Texas is? Stephenville, cowboy capital of America. From Philadelphia to Stephenville. Big change, all right? Yeah, big cities, buildings all over the place. Came to Stephenville. The college football coach, he picked me up in Dallas-Fort Worth. We drove to Stephenville. Dallas-Fort Worth still have the buildings, still familiar. We're riding. I'm starting to see less and less buildings, more and more animals. And I'm thinking to myself, I didn't see this in the pictures. I didn't see this in the pictures. Where am I going? Kind of on my phone, looking up this coach again, make sure I didn't get in the wrong car. I'm familiar with the horses. Went to Stephenville, met a girl, married her, and never left Texas. Yeah, that's it. So 10 to 12 years now. So, but yeah, Stephenville. I think one of these days we'll retire, probably in that area. Got used to the land, went back home, and then felt like everyone was too crowded. And it didn't feel like that when I lived there. I moved here, and everyone was too crowded, too close to me. So I understand about the horse. That's why I started riding horse too. First time from Philadelphia, of course. Taxi to horse, the big difference. So retirement planning. consider contributing to your employer plan or IRA. So most of the folks in here are ranch owners, is that correct? A lot of you folks are ranch owners and things like that. Contribute to any type of retirement accounts? Okay, so IRAs, individual retirement accounts, of course, there are two of them, traditional IRAs, Roth IRAs. So consider contributing to some type of retirement plans. Meet company contribution if you do work for a company, and see if they have matching. If you do work for a company who matches any type of contribution, I urge you to make that contribution whereas though they're going to match. Not too often I'll use the term free money, but that's just about free money. If they're going to give you 5%, if you give yourself 5%, take it. Okay. Take advantage of catch-up provision. So we have some catch-up provisions that, like, if you never had a IRA or traditional or Roth IRA, you do have a catch-up provision where so you can make an increase deposit into those type of accounts. Pick an appropriate investment mix. So how many folks in here have investment accounts? Okay. Allocation, you pay attention to the allocation, diversification, pretty big in diversification. Warren Buffett once said, of course, he's a really, really big, well-known guy in the financial world. He likes diversification. He doesn't believe in putting all your eggs in one basket. So if you do put your eggs in one basket, make sure it's a really good basket, right? That basket breaks at your portfolio. So diversification, diversifying your portfolio with the proper investment mix and allocation. And of course, and check your investment mix at least quarterly. I have clients that when we invest, we'll put a large sum of money in an investment portfolio. I get it started, and then I don't hear from them for a long time. And I call them and I say, "Hey, I have your money. Come in here and talk to me." I need to know what's going on in your financial world to make sure my recommendations are still, appropriate for what's going on. So, keep an eye on your investments. Don't invest and forget, but also don't be a person that buys and sells frequently. If that's not your investment strategy, you don't get to take advantage of all the gains that you get. So a little can go a long way. So this is an example. Monthly contribution, contributing 1%, so $33.33, contributing 3%, contributing 6%. So here, in example one, contributing 1%, so $33.33, potential asset accumulation over 20 years, okay? And this is with a estimated annual return. And this of 10% withdrawals out of IRAs, of course, I have to tell you, if you take it out before you're 59 and a half, Uncle Sam's going to want 10%. Okay, so you can't get away from Big Brother. He's going to want some tax money on that. And this is just an example. So contributing 1%, 20 years, that be able to increase to roughly 15,188. 25 years, 22,000. In 30 years to 32,000. That's just with 33% contributions. Move over to the 3% contribution of $100. We're looking at 20 years, 45,000. 30 years, you're looking at just under $100,000. And then with the $200 contribution, 6%, you're looking at 20 years at 91,000, and then 30 years at 195,000. So, a little goes a long way. Of course, when it's invested, you're getting your dividends paid to it. You're getting your growth from your portfolio and things of that nature. So a little can go a long way. So saving for college. How many folks in here are currently paying for college or in the midst of saving for college, whether it's for children or grandchildren? Expensive, right? Very expensive. So the cost of college continues to increase. We'll talk about that. So cost of college education is increasing. Start saving as early as possible. Consider tax advantage plans. There are some investment college plans. Grandparents may be able to help too. So that's a good one. That's a green light when I look at it. Grandparents can help too. So anyone can help. Let me see something here. All right. So, saving for college, their estimated cost of college. So how college is going to increase. So the average cost of college in 2016, I'm reading this verbatim, was $97,000. Okay, that was the average cost of college in 2016. A child born in 2016 goes to college in 18 years. That's 2034. Those numbers are projected to increase significantly to $222,466 for a public college for 4 years. That's public. And then for a private institution, $437,982 for a 4-year private school education. So that's a lot of money, all right? If you want to send your child, your grandchild, you want to assist in that education, and they plan on going to a private university, I mean, that's just under $500,000. A 4-year university, $250,000. So the cost of college is increasing steadily, and inflation increases, college increases, interest rate increases. So all those things go hand in hand. So any questions off of anything I've covered today? No? Okay. So trying it all together, again, one thing I want you to leave with is, our financial priorities, our life priorities. Again, this is what Bank of America sent to our clients, whether they're clients or not. If you had any affiliation, you came into Bank of America, we got your email, we sent this survey out, just to understand what's important to you. And these life priorities is what continue to increase, all right? So again, those life priorities, family, that's that college, heirs, things of that nature, giving, charitable organizations, to your churches, religious groups, you work, switching employment, home purchasing, refinancing, rental property, buying land, refinancing land, leisure activities, taking vacations, of course, your health, you want to keep that, want to stay on top of your health, but of course, healthcare costs is increasing. If you have private health insurance, of course, that can be really, really expensive, and we'll see what changes happen in terms of healthcare, and of course, it all ties back down to your finances. So keep in consideration your life priorities. All right, so we're here to help. Again, my name is Shamarr, Prentice, and I'm the financial advisor, and I appreciate you guys listening to me today. Thank you. Before I leave, did everyone sign the sign-in sheet? Oh, still going around. Okay, so if everyone can sign that sign-in sheet, I greatly appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Prentice. And I think I speak for everyone in here. Both Ty and Caroline need a horse. So, quarter horse. Yeah, little girls and horses. We're going to take a 10-minute break. So real quick, if you guys need to run the restroom, get something to drink, and get back here, we'll keep going. We got a lot of good stuff left to go.